Westbourne by the sea.
No.
Welcome to Bournemouth. We would especially like to welcome anyone visiting the United Kingdom and those of you who are visiting Bournemouth for the first time, and say hello to any true Bournemouthians. For your own safety, please remain seated whilst the bus is moving at all times. And if you would like to ask your tour driver any questions, please do so, but only when the bus has stopped at one of the dedicated bus stops on our tour today. Please press the bell if you wish to disembark at any of our stops. If you would like to look at your map, you will be able to follow our route, which will take in the highlights of some of the attractions and important locations we will be viewing today. We will also give you some of Bournemouth's long history, from the Romans to the present day and beyond. We hope this will whet your appetite for more detailed visits to many of our unique historic buildings, the piers, the soft golden sands, and of course our clubs, pubs, restaurants, cafe bars, theatres and shops.
Welcome again to the Bournemouth City Sightseeing Tour. We're heading for Poole, by way of the centre of Bournemouth. Crossing the overpass, on the right, there's a clear view of the pier and beach. Down on the left we see the lower gardens, where the gardeners have used the mild microclimate to make the largest rockery in any city in the country. They've won prizes at the Chelsea Flower Show for their ideas. Coming up on our right is the white-turreted Royal Bath Hotel. It was the first big hotel in Bournemouth and has been enjoyed by many of the rich and famous, such as Edward VII and the notoriously dissolute playwright Oscar Wilde. His name graces the five-star restaurant here. Behind the hotel is one of Bournemouth's best-kept secrets, the Russell Coates Museum, one of the best museums of Victorian art, style and ideas in the country.
Sir Merton Russell Coates was a former mayor of Bournemouth, and he and his wife filled their home, Eastcliff Hall, with the best Art Nouveau of the time, as well as the exotic souvenirs they collected on their travels around the world. Sir Merton also owned the white-turreted Royal Bath Hotel on the hill leading down to Bournemouth Pier.
As we travel down Westover Road, look up. Many of the buildings feature Art Deco architecture above some of the most expensive shops in Bournemouth. Should you wish to buy a Rolex, a diamond, a fine suit or a fancy frock, then you need look no further. Off the old Westover Road, nothing survives today. However, in their initial construction, they comprised substantial family houses with staff quarters and private gardens. They cost at least £500 to build. Bournemouth only wanted to attract the very rich. Westover Road was also where the first guest houses in Bournemouth appeared. The 19th century saw great enthusiasm for sea bathing and for taking sea air. This enthusiasm has not diminished, unlike the bathing suits one may see on the beach today.
While we're waiting to set off, I'd like to welcome you to this city sightseeing tour. Your city sightseeing tour leaflet will give you lots of ideas of other tours and experiences in the area. Bournemouth Square is really considered the centre of the town, with the main department stores and meeting places. Now pedestrianised, for many years it was the main intersection where 7 roads from the north, the east and west met. A number of the original buildings surrounding the square were lost due to bombing during the Second World War, but nothing like the extent of Southampton to the east and Plymouth to the west. Through the centre you'll see the gardens stretching back inland in one direction and down to the seafront in the other, making a mile-long green corridor along the Bourne Stream, which gives Bournemouth its name. Former Prime Minister Winston Churchill holidayed in Bournemouth as a child, where he would sail a model boat in the stream. coming up on our left is BH2, the new cinema and restaurant complex. But this was once the site of the town's bus station, which was so large it had 2 levels. Between the 1930s and the 1970s, the bus station was buzzing with holidaymakers during the summer months. However, it was badly damaged by fire during 1976. Although around 80 buses on the upper level managed to be driven out, 16 coaches on the lower level were destroyed, and the building was finally demolished in 1982. When we leave the square and head back up the hill towards the seafront, look out for a white turreted building on your left, called the Royal Exeter Hotel. It's on the site of the very first house which was built in the town, by the founder of Bournemouth, Lewis Tregonwell. For many years this area was open heathland, but by the 1790s smugglers were using the area to move their contraband from the cliff tops and chines. Tregonwell was stationed here as a captain of militia, and his job was to defend against a possible French invasion and to also help combat the smugglers. The area's most famous smuggler was Isaac Gulliver. In 1810, after Tregonwell had retired from service as a Dorset Ranger, he brought his wife Henrietta here, and she fell in love with the sea views. They bought the land from Sir George Taps and built their summer residence.
As we travel up Priory Road, we head up onto the West Cliff. This area has an extremely wide choice of hotels and guest houses. There is something for everyone, from young person's budget accommodation costing £20 a night, through to the very expensive and very plush Marriott Highcliffe, the choice of politicians attending party conferences, standing on the left just above a lift to the beach. The very big investments in more hotels, bars and restaurants reflects Bournemouth's potential as the South Coast's leading resort, and the fact that the area is very busy on weekends throughout the year. At the next roundabout, notice the mature pine trees that dominate the street scene from here on. 200 years ago, Bournemouth looked very different. It would have been bare and sandy heathland, like much of the New Forest to the east and Dorset to the west. But then landowners started planting more than 3 million Scots pines. This was partly to replenish the country's timber stocks after the wars with the French, and partly to cash in on the supposed health benefits of the sea air blowing through the pine needles. By the 1880s, the transformation was complete. The Dorset writer Thomas Hardy called Bournemouth Sandbourne in his novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and described it as a Mediterranean lounging place on the English Channel. Truer and truer with our special microclimate and global warming.
Let's drive deeper into the pine woods along a purpose-built scenic drive with amazing views of the coastline. If the weather is clear, a fine view is coming up on the left of the white chalk cliffs of Old Harry at the end of the Isle of Purbeck. The road follows valleys called chines, transformed by the erosion of the sand and gravel into lush microclimates that entice the visitor to explore. We're following Durley Chine, and we will cross over Middle Chine and Alum Chine before meeting more of them later. These chines provided cover for smugglers moving contraband inland. Smuggling was not so much a cottage industry as serious organised crime. To avoid paying tax on drink and tobacco from France, smuggling depended on gangs of local men to receive the goods from boats and hide them if required before wider distribution. The area was littered with tunnels and secret chambers to stash the contraband. The biggest boss of them all was Isaac Gulliver, who led a small army decked out in his own livery. When his home was demolished, it was found to contain a secret room only accessible through a door 10 feet up a chimney.
The bus will be slowing down to cross some bridges that cross the chines. The first is a 100-year-old suspension bridge, and there's a wooden one later on. The most famous of the bridges was a rustic walkway where an accident occurred in 1892 that could have dramatically changed the whole course of history. The future Prime Minister and wartime leader, Winston Churchill, was a teenager on holiday with his younger brother and cousin. They chased him along the bridge. When he tried to jump across to a fir tree, he lost his grip and fell 30 feet to the ground below. He was unconscious for 3 days and bedbound for 3 months.
So just as we make our way round the bend here, believe you me, I've been round the bend a few times. If you look out to your left, you have a glorious view of the start of our Jurassic coastline. It starts here at Old Harry Rocks and stretches for 95 miles all the way to Orkham Bay in East Devon. There are 2 stories as to how Old Harry Rocks got its name. One is that Old Harry was the nickname for the devil. People believed that the devil slept on top of the rocks, so they decided to name them Old Harry after the devil. The other is the infamous pirate Harry Pay. He would lie in wait in his ship behind the rocks, awaiting for the merchant ships to come past to attack them and steal their contraband. So people named them Old Harry after the pirate Harry Pay. Every year in June, Poole Quay has Harry Pay Day. So you get lots of things going on, and Poole Quay literally just comes alive with everybody dressed as pirates. Ooh-ar.
From another bridge across the chine, we can see palm trees and other thick exotic vegetation below. The chines provide a microclimate that allows plants from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Asia and South America to flourish. These award-winning tropical gardens were first established in the 1920s and replanted in 1996. Follow the well-marked plant trail through the yuccas and agaves, the plant from Mexico that is the basic ingredient of tequila. The name of this chine is alum chine, called after a substance that was produced here 400 years ago from minerals found in the sand. Alum was used to fix the colour of dyed cloth and for softening leather in the tanning process. Mining didn't carry on for long, but some claim that the first chemical industry in Britain was born in this area.
Another famous resident of the Chines was Robert Louis Stevenson, the adventure story writer best known for Treasure Island. He came to Bournemouth for his health and lived close to here for 3 years in the 1880s, producing The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Kidnapped. The success of these works allowed him to travel to Samoa in search of even better health, but he died there in 1894. He called his house here Skerryvore, after a Scottish lighthouse built by his family. Skerryvore was destroyed during the Second World War, but you can visit a memorial garden on its site.
So if you look out to your left, just as we make our right turn here and head up into Westbourne, you can see Skerryvore, the memorial garden. And another famous resident to the chimes, just here on the right, with the white and grey wall, is Mungo Jerry. In the summertime, when the weather is hot,
As we come into Westbourne, we pass elegant houses and reach an affluent area with many small independent shops, posh boutiques, delis and restaurants. Westbourne is known to its residents as the Village and is admired for the friendly atmosphere of its streets and arcades. It has such a great reputation that people come from all over Bournemouth and Poole to eat and drink here. Westbourne is also home to some of the best pubs in Bournemouth, a great place to sample the very best of British beer, real ale from local producers like Hall and Woodhouse, or the Ringwood Brewery.
Look across to the large roundabout on the right called County Gates. These days, you can see the offices of an insurance company, Liverpool and Victoria in the centre. But for many years, this was the boundary between the counties of Dorset to the west and Hampshire to the east. In 1974, Bournemouth and Christchurch were incorporated into Dorset, boosting the size of the small county enormously. Today, roughly half of Dorset's population of over 700,000 lives in the Poole Bournemouth conurbation.
You are now in Poole. The easiest way to see which side of the boundary you are is to look at the wheelie bins. Poole have bright blue bins compared to the Bournemouth municipal grey model. We are now travelling down the avenue. Many of the mature pine trees either side of the road were here before Bournemouth existed as a town. The sandy, acidic soil, characteristic of the area, provides very little nutrients for crop plants. The plants that do thrive, gorse, bracken and heather, can still be found in many little pockets in people's gardens, the edges of parks and along the top of the cliff. Look out for the yellow gorse bushes. Warmed by the sun, the small shiny edible flowers give off a sweet smell, reminiscent of coconuts.
Next stop, Brownsea Island. Hop off the bus here to get straight onto the beach. There is a seafront promenade, and if you turn left you could walk a mile and a half or so and you will reach Bournemouth Pier. Turn right and you could walk just over a mile until you reach Sandbanks. If you walk straight ahead you can enjoy a blue flag beach with some of the cleanest bathing water in England. Also on the beach is an elegant restaurant that is especially known for its variety of fresh fish daily. It's in an Art Deco building of the 1930s which housed the country's first solarium, offering artificial sunshine under ultraviolet lamps all year round.
If you look to the right as we climb the hill, you can see the start of one of the longest chines, Brownsea Chine. It stretches inland for 1.5 miles and is said to have been a regular route for smugglers as they headed inland. One visitor who appreciated the walks here was the poet John Betjeman. He wrote, "Walk the asphalt paths of Brownsea Chine in resin-scented air like strong Greek wine." The houses either side of the chine have some of the biggest plots in the area, affording maximum privacy, making them very desirable and very expensive. With many homes selling for over £1 million, electric gates and swimming pools and supercars are the norm. In this area of Poole, comparisons with Beverly Hills are not unwarranted.
The village at the top of the hill is an exclusive neighbourhood called Canford Cliffs. If you wish to visit Compton Acres Gardens, be ready to ring the bell in the village and hop off just after it. After a 3-minute walk, you'll be wandering around 7 distinct ornamental gardens, including an Italian garden and a Japanese garden, with spectacular views across Poole Harbour. Someone has worked out that the average wealth of the residents of Canford Cliffs is within the top 2% of people in the country. If you look carefully, you can see some signs. Rolls Royces are commoner on the streets here than anywhere else. A hairdressing salon offers a valet parking service, and the luxurious cafes are designed so that you can both see and be seen if you wish. Canford Cliffs hit the headlines when a bank decided not to allow clients to use its branch unless they had an income of £100,000 a year, but that did not affect the village's reputation for a very friendly atmosphere. After the village, enjoy the gradual descent towards Poole Harbour, with many fabulous new houses being built on either side.
At the bottom of the hill, we'll be returning to sea level on reaching the shore of Poole Harbour. This is the second largest natural harbour in the world, after Sydney Harbour in Australia. You'll see that it is popular with all types of boat owners, and particularly windsurfers. The harbour has double tides, which means that there is a useful amount of high water to sail in during each 24-hour period. If you want to drive round the harbour, it's about 25 miles. But if you were to follow the shoreline closely, it would be about 5 times longer. The biggest island in the middle of the harbour is Brownsea Island, one of 5 islands in the harbour. Hidden out of sight between Brownsea and the Purbeck Hills in the distance is Ferry Island, and towards the west are Green, Round and Long Island. Poole lies over to the right, and so does Wareham, sandwiched between 2 rivers emptying into the back of the harbour. They are the River Froom and the River Piddle. That's a name which is back in favour after the starchy Victorian times when it was sometimes called the River Trent. An easy boat trip from Poole Quay will take you to Wareham for fish and chips on its quay or a walk around its Saxon defences. If you look between the houses on the left, you can see the beach. We're on a thin spit of land between Poole Harbour to our right and the English Channel to our left.
So our next stop, if anyone wishes to hop off, will be Sandbanks Beach.
The tip of the Sandbanks Peninsula has been called the Monte Carlo of the South Coast and has one of the highest land values in the world, just behind Tokyo and Manhattan. Until the 1920s, this place was covered in rabbit-infested sand dunes, but by 1999, plots were being bought and sold for more than £1 million. The most sought-after ones have water frontage, often with their own landing stage. This is a place where a developer might pay £5 million for a plot of land, tear down a perfectly good new house on it, and put up a steel and glass super home selling for £10 million. As well as houses, there are a couple of hotels, shops and places to eat, including one of Rick Stein's restaurants. The former Beatle John Lennon bought a house here for his Aunt Mimi in 1965, and he would often visit to escape the limelight and the screaming fans. She continued to live here until her death in 1991. The following year the house was bulldozed, and today a new house sits on the site.
So coming up on our left very shortly, if you see the grey fronted property with the section sticking out, he's out and about because we've just passed his Range Rover. That's Mr. Harry Redknapp's.
Coming up on the left is where cars queue for the ferry across to the perfect sandy beach of Shell Bay and the rest of the Isle of Purbeck. It only takes about 3 minutes and is great for pedestrians and cyclists too. Because of the very strong tidal currents that run through the harbour entrance, the ferry pulls itself along on 2 large chains. When the chains are worn out, they're used by local fishermen to provide moorings in the harbour. Beyond the ferry we come to more fabulous properties, many lived in by well-known people such as Harry Redknapp. Harry's a local treasure in these parts because in his time he's managed Bournemouth, Southampton and Portsmouth.
So we heard on the commentary about John Lennon buying a property for his aunt here on Sandbanks. Well, just as we cross over on the left, the new property that is now sitting on that site, they've actually named it after a song by John Lennon, and it's called Imagine. The big brown property here on the left, this is where Harry Redknapp used to live, but the most important property on Sandbanks is the house next to it, this one just here. That's mine.
Brownsea Island is across the water to our left. It's very popular with walkers, bird watchers and theatre goers where the annual open air productions take place. Brownsea Castle at the left-hand end of the island is leased to the John Lewis Partnership, the owners of the Waitrose supermarket chain and the John Lewis department stores. It's used for training and as a retreat for staff to stay in and enjoy sharing it with the resident peacocks and red squirrels after the day trippers have gone home. The island is one of the few places in southern England where red squirrels survive, because grey squirrels have never been introduced to the island. The island used to have a clay mine and pottery, but all activity had ended by the time the last private owners, the Bonham Christie family, left in the early 1960s. Brownsea is famous as the home of the Scouting movement. Scouting began in 1907 when Robert Baden-Powell held the first Scouting camp on the island. He'd been a British Army general during the Boer War and saw a need for a new type of training in practical skills and leadership. Currently, over 31 million boys and girls in 216 countries are Scouts and Guides. You can see a bronze statue of Robert Baden-Powell on Poole Quay, and Poole Quay is the place to get a boat across to Brownsea Island. Please ask the driver for more details.
Behind Brownsea Island sits Furzy Island and the Witch Farm oil field. It was developed by BP in the late 1980s, and at its peak it was Western Europe's largest onshore oil field, producing over 100,000 barrels of oil a day. The oil field is in one of the country's most environmentally sensitive areas. The drillers used a directional drilling technique to tap into reservoirs extending right out 10 miles under Poole Bay to the area in front of Bournemouth Pier. The oil and gas extracted are pumped through an underground pipeline to the Fawley oil refinery near Southampton.
Sailing boats, windsurfers, kite surfers and cargo vessels are not the only activity out there on the waters. The biggest ones you will see belong to the ferry companies linking Poole with the Channel Islands, Cherbourg and St Malo. They use a channel 25 feet deep, but the average depth of the rest of the harbour is only a couple of feet. Sometimes you can see dark-coloured inflatable boats containing members of the Special Boat Service, the SBS, out on manoeuvres. The SBS is the Special Forces of the Royal Navy, manned mostly by superfit Royal Marines and based at Hamworthy, just across a lifting bridge in Poole. The SBS are the UK's equivalent of the US Navy SEALs. They specialise in amphibious operations using mini subs and small boats for intelligence gathering and counter-terrorism operations.
Also on the water, but trained to save lives rather than to take them, are lifeboats from the Royal National Lifeboat Institution's headquarters and college, which are also in Poole.
You're going to want to go and buy that now, aren't you?
Travelling through the area called Lilliput, and now we're beginning to get close again to shallow tidal inlets and reclaimed land on the left. The road narrows to go under a high railway bridge carrying the main railway line between Weymouth and London Waterloo. It takes about 2 hours by train to London. Some people commute there from this area every day. Further west at Wareham, the line used to connect with a branch line to Swanage, but it was taken up in the early 1970s. Soon after, a group of enthusiastic local volunteers joined together to reopen a short section of the track to steam trains. They've been so successful that special steam trains from London can now run occasionally between London and Swanage, and there are hopes of a permanent connection to the rest of the rail network.
We're coming up to Poole Park on the left, and on the right is Poole Civic Centre, the seat of local government in Poole. It's the town hall. This building dates from the 1930s, and on the outside, just below the cast iron and lead guttering, there are 24 superb sculpted stone reliefs depicting historical events from the earliest times to the 20th century. The Romans made a supply base in the harbour when they invaded 2,000 years ago, but until Norman times, 1,000 years later, Wareham was the more important port. In the Middle Ages, Poole suffered raids by Spanish and French attackers, and gained some prosperity when it won the right to export wool, a product so vital to the country's economy that even today the Speaker of the House of Lords has a symbolic sack of wool as his throne. After the new colonies in North America had been founded, Poole had lucrative trade exporting all kinds of provisions, including tobacco pipes made of clay from around the harbour. But the real money spinner was trading dried cod from Newfoundland to the Catholic countries of Europe to meet their demand for fish in exchange for wine and olive oil from the Mediterranean. This made local merchants vastly rich and explains the opulent houses you'll see in the High Street and on the quay in Poole. But 200 years ago, other ports took over this trade, and Poole dwindled in importance as its harbour proved too shallow for the new generation of ships.
Over to the left is Poole Park, where people have been playing tennis and bowls and sailing model boats since Victorian times. These days you can walk along the lakeside, feed the swans, watch the cricket, ride the mini train or play mini golf. There is a Keep Fit trail, and for younger visitors there's a small skating rink and a jungle playground. Leaving Poole town centre on our way to the quay, we go through an area of considerable recent building to meet the needs of an ever-expanding population. There used to be the site of an old gasworks on our right, but the main buildings there now are halls of residence for Bournemouth University. The residential area further on is called Beta, and has become very popular because it's just next door to the harbour, the quay and the town centre. Nearby is Beta Park, an area of reclaimed land with a public slipway and a large flat area of grass, where you may be able to see jet skis launching and kites pulling surfers on boards both on land and offshore. Beyond Beta we reach the area of Poole, where the holiday atmosphere is strongest. During the main tourist season, Poole Quay literally explodes into life. The many pubs and restaurants are often bursting at the seams as everyone enjoys the regular programme of free summer events here from Tuesday to Friday evenings. Friday sees lines of fun cars on the quay, and Tuesday is the Dream Machines parade of gleaming superbikes, the biggest event of its kind in the country. Wednesday is Speedway night at Poole Pirates Stadium.
They do scooters and motorbikes. Every Thursday night, Steve was with me till about 6 o'clock. They get all the local, it's not like a local bike gang, but you know what I mean, all the clubs come out and all the scooter guys come out and then you have a look at them. So we never should have a Thursday night. Apparently they do it every Thursday night. Oh, sorry. I'll catch you.
We'll be returning to the quay in a moment, but notice the marina on your left, where boat trips and RIB rides depart from, and in the new buildings to your right is the Poole Pottery Showroom.
We will be driving in a quick loop that takes us down the High Street Poole's Old Town before stopping on the quay itself. Our route takes us from the site of Poole's former fish markets towards the elegant houses, Guildhall and Customs House built by Poole's rich merchants of the 18th century. The best way to see these wonderful buildings, complete with their stories of smugglers and ghosts, is to explore the streets leading to the right from High Street, which we are turning left to enter. As we travel down the High Street, look at the coaching inns and shop fronts which hide medieval rooms and cellars. On the left is Lush, one of 600 shops run by a company in Poole making handmade soaps, bubble baths and lotions. Other world-famous brands with headquarters in Poole are Animal, who make clothing and equipment for surfing and biking, Rivita, the crisp bread popular with dieters, and Merlin Entertainments, the people who own attractions like Legoland, Madame Tussauds and the London Eye. On the right, just before the quay, lies Poole Museum, free to enter and offering a fascinating glimpse of the history of Poole. Right across from the quay to the right, there are multi-million-pound hand-built boats made here by the 1800 craftsmen at Sunseeker, the world's largest privately owned builder of luxury motor yachts. These yachts are sold throughout the world and have featured in several recent James Bond films.
Down here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will shortly be arriving at our final stop on Poole Quay. Now there are 2 buses going around, and we depart on the hour, every hour, with our last bus departing back to Bournemouth at 6 o'clock. If you miss that bus, you have to swim. There are lots of nice places to grab a cup of coffee, have something to eat. You have a lovely coffee shop in the Titan Leather Shop. The Portsmouth Hoy does top quality fresh food. They open at 12 o'clock. You also have a Wetherspoons. If you are taking a boat trip today, then please make your way straight over to the City Cruises kiosk, the red and white kiosk, just over on the right ahead of us. Produce your ticket and they will book you on your preferred trip for the day. And if you are leaving us here, have a very pleasant day and we look forward to seeing you again.